Hello everybody, Sarah here from SH Millinery, and this is the second in my question and answer videos where you ask questions, I try to provide the answers. Now, I had two questions about sinamay, and the first one was, how do I use some of the more unusual products out there? So I'm going to be showing you what you can do with ombre sinamay, sinamay with vine leaves on it, metallic sinamays, and this very strange woven sinamay that I bought the other day. So I'm going to be talking about unusual products. And the second question was, how do you block so that you don't get lots of wrinkles and crinkles? So I'm going to be answering that as well. I hope you find it enjoyable, and thank you to the two people who asked those questions, and their names will be coming up along the bottom. Thanks a lot. So here we are, getting on with our next question and answer session. And what we're going to be talking about are sinamays, but unusual ones that you don't use every day. Now, of course, everyone knows ordinary plain sinamay, and I'm going to start with this little bit of sinamay that I have here, which is embroidered. Now, when you buy embroidered sinamays, you'll find they're on a very loose weave, very loose weave. I think you can see it there, and it's been machine embroidered over the top. Now that means, because it's very loose weave, and you can't double it up, because you'll lose your pattern and it still won't be stiff enough. So when you've got loose weave fabrics like this, you've got to use a base of plain sinamay. So I'm going to use this sort of peachy colour because I thought it would go quite nice with that rusty orange and the peachy bit there and the chocolate brown. So I'm going to use these two to put together for a little beret hat. So it's covered with cling film. I'm making a mess here. And I need a piece of plain that will cover the whole block. Let's see where we are. So let's have bits cut out the corners. We'll go roughly round and then sort it out. So I want a piece that's going to go all around. That's a bit too big. Let's chop some of that off. And then I want a piece of my embroidered. And I think I'm going to have to go with this corner here. So again, chop a bit off. It's not so easy to cut with my rubbish scissors because it's got embroidery on it. So right. Okay. So I've got my two pieces. Now I'm going to, this is the wrong side, that's the right side. So there. What I'm going to do is wet them by just spraying them with some water. And what I tend to do is I keep all my old plastic bottles that had other products in, clean them thoroughly, and then fill them with water so that I've got my own spray bottles. So we're going to put that one on there, and that one on there. Let me choose, yeah, like that. And then I'm going to pin. As always, north, south, east, west. Now I've got too much straw here, so I'll have to trim, otherwise I'll find it difficult to get it onto the block. Now, we don't want lots of creases, so what you've got to do once you start going around is pull it in carefully so that you minimise any creasing on the outside of the block. So in effect, you're sort of pleating it as you go. So let's see how that's looking. Yeah. So you can see that there. Get as many pins in as you can so that you get a nice smooth edge. Right, so it's pinned on. And now what I'm going to do is plug my iron in. Now what I'm going to do is use a cloth. This is a piece of polycotton, and the dye doesn't come off it. It would be better to use a plain white piece of cloth, but I forgot to bring that in. And what I'm going to do is press around the sides with my iron so that I press the pleats and the edges in, smooth it round. So it flattens it down nicely. Top. There we are. Now it's nice and smooth and flat. Now, because both these sinamays are not particularly stiff, I am going to add some stiffener. And I'm just going to use some PVA. Now, again, it was in a spray bottle, but unless you clean them out properly, the spray bottles clog up. And that's not good at cleaning them out. So I've poured some into a dish, and I'm just going to use a clean paintbrush. Just to give it some extra welly. Don't forget to do all around the sides as well as the top. And I'm going to put a bit round here. Right, I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to clean my desk and get on with the next project. Now I'm going to talk about metallic sinamays. Now you can see I've got a pink here with a pink window sinamay with metallic in. I've got some blue metallic and a sort of a minty green metallic. I can't say I'm madly keen on that colour, so I'll put that to one side. I might have to dye that, not keen on that colour. Now, the thing about metallic sinamays is that one of the weaves is metal. It's, you know, thin strips of probably aluminium. So it's not going to perform the same way as plain sinamay because you've got this metal in it. And again, you can't really, this is quite a stiff one actually, but of course the window isn't because it's a thinner fabric, the way it's been woven in the window pane pattern. So again, you really got to use this over the top of something else. So you can't just make a hat out. Well, you can, I've done it, but you don't get a terribly good effect because it tends to look a bit messy. So for this, I'm going to use this block here, because the other question, apart from what do you do with these fancy sinamay, was how do you get the creases and crinkles out when you're blocking it. Now, I just showed on the beret a quick tip for around the edges, but we're going to do a bit more of that on this block. Because of course the thing about sinamay is it comes in a flat sheet. So you're trying to turn something that's flat into something that's concave or convex. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pale pink as the base. Oh. And then I'm going to use this over the top. So let me get a bit of pink off. Yeah. I don't want to put it all the way to the bottom of this block, so I'll just do a small one. I always cut the salve edge off because that doesn't stretch and you'll have problems. And it's very stiff, this one. So I'm going to have that as the base and the metallic as the top. Let's move things out of the way. Oh, once again, we are going to wet our sinamays. Let that soak in a minute. Once it starts soaking in, it should become more pliable. Yeah, it's getting there. This needs to be a bit stretchable. It's quite stiff, this pink. Let's clean the decks and drip off any excess. We don't want any excess floating about. Right, so there's our block. So we're going to put it at an angle like this, just give it a quick stretch to see if it's going to do that. Yep. And then our window pane over the top at a slightly different angle. Now I'm going to use a blocking spring. Whether you use a blocking spring or some ordinary string, entirely up to you. Now, I do talk about these in another video, where to get them from or how to make them. Oh, your fingers are all slippy. Just get it started onto the block. Down as far as we can get it. Now, as I said, you're trying to make something that's flat into a round. And what people worry about is all these creases and crinkles. Now, what you've got to try and do is get them really into one area so that you can minimise that. So pull your underneath. Try to not have huge pleats, but just dainty ones. If possible, dainty. There's nothing dainty about me. So keep pulling round, stretching, pulling your under sinamay first, then pull your top down like that. So what you want really, and this is why sinamay hats always tend to have a band around the crown, because there's no way you can avoid pleats because that's the nature of what you're doing. But you want to really minimise them. So, yeah, you don't want great big ones. You want small ones so that they're barely noticeable. See, that's a big one there. I don't want that one there. Unfold, stretch, and stretch a bit more. Right, and when you've got them to a point where you're happy with them, that's when your iron and your blocking cloth come into play again. So I'm going to turn my iron back on. Here. You need a cloth because the iron's mucky. And you can see it flattens them right down. So what you want to do is do that all the way around, and then when it's dry, you want to run the iron over it again. What I did forget to say when I was doing it previously was that I brushed it again with PVA. Now the reason for that was not really to stiffen it, but to stick the window sinamay down to the crown so that I could iron it again and get it all very flat. And as you can see, it looks very neat and tidy. So I'll take it off. I think it's dry. I might go down. Sometimes it's easier. Yeah, so it's nice and flat. Okay. Now you can't block sinamay all in one because of the fact that when you get to a brim, you can't get rid of the crinkles and wrinkles and it doesn't look good. So you always tend to have to block sinamay as a two-parter brim. So that's what we do with metallic. And again, you don't have to have the same colour underneath. I mean, here I've got some blue to go under the blue, but you can choose alternative colours and that can sometimes give a very, very nice effect. So that's metallics. You can also buy ombre sinamay. 2 colours or 3 colours in one. And again, you have to think carefully about this. How do you want to block it? Because you want to make use of the ombre effect. You don't want to go, oh, well, I'll just block that pink bit and then I'll just block that blue bit. So, oh, the camera's getting in the way. And again, it's quite, you can't fold this over because then the ombre would all be in the wrong place. So you've got to choose something for your underneath. Now what I've done here is I thought a pale grey would look good under this because it would show up the blue really well. And you've got the pink. Now what I would tend to do with something like this, and I'm not going to do it now because obviously I'm using up a lot of materials just to show you things. Something like a big saucer shape would be great because you've got the ombre sort of going across there. And if you're doing a crown, don't think you just have to do the crown that way. You can do it that way. Anyway, so you have to sort of think about it with ombre. Think about what's going to look good. I ordered this. I thought, what's that? It's woven sinamay. It's woven, it's strips of sinamay woven. And it is actually a mat for the floor. It comes as one huge square and it's all been bound around the edge. And I think it's meant as a mat for the floor. And if you were in a lovely sunny clime, that would probably be a very useful mat coming in off the beach. But I haven't quite worked out what we can do with it regards hats. It's very, very, very stiff. So I just thought I'd show you it for now, because I am going to work on something, an idea for this. Be great for covering handbags. I mean, it's perfect for buying a bag frame and putting on a bag. But I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to use it for a hat, because it is very stiff. Because in effect, it's like 3 or 4 layers of sinamay where it's been woven. But I just thought I'd show you that. Of course, you can get other embroidered sinamays. And again, the weave is incredibly loose. You couldn't just block that as a hat, and anyway you couldn't, because these appliqued vine leaves won't bend. They won't bend, they stay in a straight line. So really, when you're using something like this, you've got to think about how you're going to use it. So for example, you'd just put one section over another sinamay around the block. I'm going to see if it cuts out, if you can use it as cutout. So you can see I've actually cut this piece out. I've got to trim it up still. But I wondered what it would be like. And obviously it would be nice going round a crown. You know, just as an added decor. Yeah, it's got to be trimmed up. Added decor, you could stitch that on with the sewing machine or by hand. So it doesn't bend. So it can only be used in either the round or across sections of a brim, things like that. You could probably chop it up into smaller amounts and use it, you know, a bit here and a bit there. Make up your own pattern with it. I'm just trying to see. Yeah. You can sort of fold it and do things with it. But as I say, it's very loose weave. You would have to stitch it down well and trim it up a little bit better than I've done here. What they've done is they've plaited straw here and then just done little leaves on the sides. So I'm going to have a play with that. If I make something interesting, I'm sure I will, I'll come back to you and show you. But,